So hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and today I want to take a quick look at Pandero, which is a single-shot secondary weapon that's been added with update 20. Now the weapon is actually pretty easy to get because you just get the blueprint from the market. Now the blueprint itself will cost you 20,000 credits, and to build it you will have to put an additional 20,000 credits, 2 argon crystals, 4,500 circuits, 5,500 cryotic, and 25,000 salvage. Now the one thing that could be considered expensive here is the cryotic, because 5,500 cryotic is 55 full excavators, but since the weapon requires mastery rank 7, you will probably do more than 55 excavators by the time you get there. Unless, of course, you're just bomb rushing it. Now, the Pandero comes with two different fire modes. The primary mode will fire off a single shot that's very accurate, though if you're not aiming down sights, the multi-shot rounds tend to fly all over the place, and the secondary fire mode will just fire off the rest of your magazine. Now, with the exception of accuracy, the stats are exactly the same on both fire modes. So the only difference between the primary and secondary fire mode is that the secondary fire mode is less accurate, which is not that noticeable because it also kicks like a bloody mule. Now, speaking about stats, the Pandero is a very solid single shot weapon, both in terms of primary and secondary stats, because it does 76 damage with each shot, 38 out of which is slash, and 19 is both impact and puncture. It has 30% critical chance, 250% crit multiplier, and 15% status chance. It also comes with 8 rounds in the magazine, 210 rounds in total, and a fantastic 1-second reload. This weapon is basically all the things that I like about single-shot weapons put into one, though it doesn't come with any Forma, so the builds are somewhat more expensive than on some other weapons. Now, I decided to go with a very cheap 3 Forma build where I've just added 3 Vs. And the mods I'm using are Hornet Strike for more damage, Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot, Barrel Diffusion for multi-shot, then Pistol Gambit and Target Cracker for crit chance and multiplier, and finally Jolt with Pistol Pestilence for corrosive damage, and Scorch for heat damage, and also a ton of status chance. And even though this is just a 3 Forma build, it is really bloody effective even against salty level enemies. The mix of crit and status is just incredibly strong, even against level 100 bombards. You do have to proc corrosive a little bit before you can shred them with crits, but once you do, they die very, very fast. And while this would be an issue with like 99% of the other single-shot weapons, it's not on the Pandero because of the secondary fire mode. It melts armor incredibly fast. And if you really get used to the recoil and you learn how to compensate for it, you can hit a lot of headshots even with the secondary mode. And trust me, if you do learn to compensate for the recoil, this weapon is a monster. Now, the weapon is obviously gonna perform much better if you use all 3 of the primed mods, so Primed Target Cracker, Primed Pistol Gambit, and also Primed Heated Charge. And while I would definitely recommend you try to get on as many primed mods as you have, I didn't do it because, well, honestly, I think it's rather silly to judge a weapon based on its performance with 3 bloody primed mods. Almost any weapon can do loads of damage if you put on 3 bloody primed mods, so I decided to go for a more sensible build with mods that anyone can get very easily, and it also gives you a better idea of how strong this weapon actually is. And, you know, I can also cut down on my Forma usage a little bit, which is always good, because right now I can easily blast through 20 or even 30 Forma a week, and that's not good for my mental health. And there's also a bunch of YouTubers that do this min-maxing stuff a lot better than me, you know, like Potato or Headshot or even Noob Show Tech. Now, as I've said already, this weapon is just everything I like about different weapons bundled into one. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I tend to build weapons in a certain way. I really like hybrid weapons that can utilize status and crit at the same time. I like short reloads and high accuracy. I also like weapons that don't weigh too heavily towards one damage type, because if you have a weapon that does a lot of damage but all of it is puncture, it's not going to be too effective versus flesh or even shields. And at that point, if you don't compensate for it very heavily, it's only really useful versus the Grenier. It's not going to do much versus the Corpus or even the Infested. This is my perfect single-shot weapon. It's basically a slash-based version of Lex Prime without any of the drawbacks of Lex Prime. And I really like the dynamic you have between the 2 different fire modes. The primary mode is your headshot mode. You're running around, you're popping heads left, right, and center. But if enemies get too close or there is a big group of them, which is usually a problem for single-shot weapons, you just blast them away with the secondary fire. So the 2 different fire modes of the Pandero make a lot of sense because you actually use them in different situations rather than using one of them all the time because it's obviously better. Also, while the weapon may look a little bit silly with the basic Octavia colors, it is bloody gorgeous if you play around with the colors a little bit. I mean, look at that. That looks so good. So yeah, the Pandero gets a big thumbs up from me. You should definitely get this weapon. It is fan-doodly-tastic. And that's pretty much it for the video. So I thank you very much for watching as always, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.